So let's talk about ancient Egypt, but maybe not in the way you're used to. We're not just going to look at the pyramids and pharaohs today. Instead, we're going to explore a very specific intellectual journey, a curated reading list from the Temple of Set that reveals way more than just history. It's actually a complete method for how to understand it. And just to put the scale of this into perspective, get this. According to the source, the ancient Egyptian nation was around for a period 15 times longer than the United States has even existed. I mean, that's 3 times longer than the entire Roman Empire. It's just a mind-bogglingly huge stretch of time. And right there, that's the big problem, isn't it? When a civilization lasts for thousands and thousands of years, leaving behind all these monuments and texts and mysteries, how do you even begin to tell an accurate story? How do you sort out what's real from what's just myth? This quote right here, it just nails the whole problem this reading list is trying to solve. The source basically argues that Egypt's history has been twisted and co-opted by people who are way more interested in pushing a sensational story than in getting to the facts. This reading list is their answer to that abuse. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll dig into why Egypt is such a contested heritage in the first place. Then we'll check out the standard academic tools the list says you should start with. After that, we're diving into the more controversial stuff. Pyramids, mysteries, the whole deal. Then comes the really radical thesis of a guy named Gerald Massey, before we finally see how all of this comes together to forge a unique Setanian perspective on history. All right, let's jump right into section 1. This really sets the stage for the entire philosophy behind this list. You see, the whole point here is that this isn't just a random collection of books. It's a mission statement. The real goal is to give you the tools to cut through all that noise and build a rigorous, accurate understanding of Egypt's past, without all the later distortions. It's all about building a foundation of responsible scholarship. So, how do you actually build that foundation? Well, that brings us right to section 2. You start with the basics, the accepted mainstream works from established Egyptologists. And this slide is the perfect example of the method. The list doesn't just tell you, hey, read this book. It tells you how to read it. So you start with a classic, like Budge's work, but you're immediately warned, hey, this thing is dated, and it has a really specific bias. So what's the solution? You immediately read it alongside a modern work, like Paul Jordan's. The method is clear right from the get-go. Compare, contrast, and always, always think critically. Okay, so once you've got that solid foundation, the list kind of throws you into the deep end. Section 3 is where we get into all the stuff that's usually sensationalized. The pyramids, the curses, all those mysteries. And this is where that critical method really gets a workout. First, you're given a book like this one by Peter Tompkins. The list actually praises it, calling it a super sophisticated, comprehensive analysis that's packed with science and math. It's presented as a serious deep dive, not just some pyramid fad book. But then, and this is the key, immediately after, you're handed the total opposite argument. The list recommends Ahmed Fakhri's work specifically because it's a good contrast. Fakhri is painted as this solidly materialistic academic who basically just ignores any data that doesn't fit his conventional worldview. You see what's happening here? The list is training you to hold two completely opposite, really detailed arguments in your head at the same time so you can find the truth somewhere in the middle. And all of that critical thinking brings us to what is really the intellectual climax of this entire reading list. Section 4 introduces the one figure whose work seems to be the key that unlocks this whole perspective. And that figure is Gerald Massey. He was an amateur Egyptologist around the turn of the century, and his work was so out there, so different from the accepted story, that, according to the source, he was totally rejected by academic circles. He's really positioned here as the ultimate outsider thinker. The list presents Massey's own intellectual journey as this fascinating progression towards enlightenment. He called his first big work Written in the Dark. His second one, he said, was Written in the Twilight. But his final, massive work, Ancient Egypt, he claimed was written in the light of day. This whole framing builds his ideas up as this powerful final revelation. And what was in that final work? Well, a bunch of truly startling claims. Massey argued that nearly all major Hebrew and Christian myths actually had Egyptian origins. He claimed the Setnian religion was the oldest on Earth. He even reframed huge historical events, arguing the Hyksos weren't foreign invaders at all, but an indigenous group, and that all of Egyptian history is basically one long power struggle between Setnian and Assyrian factions. These are the explosive ideas at the very heart of this reading path. So after that intellectual bombshell, where does that leave us?
Well, Section 5 is all about synthesis. It's about taking all these different pieces, the orthodox, the speculative, and the super radical, and forging your own personal understanding.
This table really breaks it all down. When you get right down to it, this reading list isn't really about Egyptology, it's a methodology for learning. The goal is to get to a personal, accurate understanding. The tools are a wild mix of orthodox scholarship, controversial theories, even movies, and the process is relentless. Critically analyze everything, constantly cross-reference, and actively go looking for opposing viewpoints. It's a blueprint for how to think, not just what to think.
Which really leaves us with one last fascinating question to chew on. We've just taken apart one very deliberate reading list and the worldview it's designed to build. So what about your own? What sources do you trust? What counterarguments do you seek out? Or maybe which ones do you avoid? What does the reading list of your life say about how you see the world?